I think I parted my hair differently today, and I wish I really had a mirror right now in front of me so I could see what's happening. Hello friends, this is Miro and welcome to my channel. Guess who had a wonderful idea to do a bit of a switcheroo with his shelves? I did. And the thing is, it looks worse than it did before. So that is something that needs to be fixed. But anyways, this video is not about that. Today I would like to talk about common plant myths, misconceptions, misinformation, miss whatever that exist in houseplant community. Some of these are worse than others. Some are not very harmful, some are not very useful. But I would like to discuss them. I have 10 of them. Of course, there are many more, and there are even plant hacks. We are not gonna get into that. Some of these things can be kinda true. We will discuss that. But I think in the long run, most of these are not very useful, at least not in the way they are usually presented. If only I found a file where I wrote them. Oh, here they are. I totally know how to use a computer. The first plant myth is underwatering is better than overwatering. Kinda not true. The problem with underwatering is that you can take it to extremes. Trust me, I have done it. I am a notorious underwaterer by nature. I have never been an overwaterer, even when I started, because before I started getting plants, I would read books about plant care, and it was very clear to me from early on that overwatering is very bad. So I kind of started with underwatering. When someone is starting with houseplants and you tell them to underwater their plants to let the mix go bone dry, they take that to an extreme because they didn't have a plan before, maybe. And some people start to believe this is true. Oftentimes what happens is when you underwater a plant, the roots will die back. As I discussed in one of my previous videos, roots seek out moisture. That is why they exist. They grow to find moisture so they can provide it to the plant. Now, when there is no moisture, slowly but surely they will die back. The speed of them dying back also will depend on potting mix. If you put your plant in, for example, semi-hydroponics and with leca, if you let the reservoir go dry and you leave it dry for multiple days, leca will eventually dry out. Initially, the leca will hold on to that moisture that it absorbed from the reservoir, but as days go on, the moisture will disappear. It will evaporate, it will be distributed to the roots, and then the only moist thing left will be the roots. And what happens is leca will start to take away the moisture from the roots. Now this is an extreme example, but also if you let the plant in a regular potting mix dry out and go like that for prolonged periods of time, the roots can die back, especially finer roots on peperomia, begonia, calatheas. Underwatering also is a very common misconception about Hoya care. I recently saw tips about Hoya curtisi, which I do water every week or even more, and it grows really well. In fact, I might just grab it for you for a quick update. Okay, we're back. So this is my Hoya curtisi. I grew this from a very tiny cutting. I think it was definitely one vine. Now I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 grow points. So it grew from one vine, and I don't actually remember which one of these is original. I think this section here in the middle, I think that is the original one. So this is less than 6 months, or maybe approximately 6 months of growth, I would actually say. I should really put the dates on my plants. You can see this plant is doing really well. It is actually moist in there in the pot, and the roots are fine. Nothing is dying back. There is no yellowing on the leaf. This Hoya seems to be causing a lot of headache to people in the plant community. Some don't have any issues with it. Some have a lot of issues with it. Some say never to water this Hoya. Forget it. Don't look at it. Don't water it. I don't think that is the best advice. A tractor? What's next? A spaceship? UFO? If we think about Hoyas in nature, they do receive a lot of water. They receive water almost on a daily basis, depending where they grow, but most of them will receive water on a daily basis. Not watering it ever isn't really going to be helpful. What is helpful is altering your mix and giving it regular watering. As I already said in one of my previous videos, people often come to the wrong conclusion when it comes to watering. You have a plant, you don't water it in a very long time, then you give it water and it starts to rot. People usually come to the conclusion, oh, I should have waited more. In fact, the correct conclusion would be, oh, maybe I should have watered that earlier. And this happens quite frequently, actually. A lot of people say that Hoya carry is extremely difficult. I haven't found that to be true, and it's not because I'm extremely good at growing plants. Not really, but I think it's always good to question these things that people tell you. When I started growing Hoyas, I also believed that they don't need a lot of water, and they didn't really grow very fast for me, and they would always look very soft. The leaves would be very soft, they looked wrinkled. They didn't die, but they definitely didn't look their best. Very quickly, I discovered, oh, this needs a lot more water than it is recommended. I can talk about watering. I think I could dedicate a channel to watering. So let's not talk about that anymore and move on to the next plant myth. The next one is don't trim your Hoyas or they will not bloom. By the way, not all of the myths will be about Hoyas, but some of them are. I'm sorry about that. I focus on Hoyas. Don't trim your Hoyas or they won't bloom. This is completely untrue. You can trim your Hoyas, you can cut it, you can propagate it, you can gift, sell, trade cuttings of your Hoyas. Don't worry about it, they will bloom. New vines will grow. With new vines, you will get new peduncles. The big Hoya latifolia that everyone calls macrophylla. Latifolia. I cut it at least 10 times and it blooms constantly. Right now it has several peduncles and I will try to catch that on the video. I never successfully catch it on the video. I think where this myth might come from is that some Hoyas take longer to bloom. Different things trigger different Hoyas to bloom, and in some of them it is old age or maturity. Once they mature, they start blooming, like Hoya carnosa, unless you receive it with a peduncle. And I think maybe because of that, they came to the conclusion that you should never cut it. But it's not really that. I saw many different information when Hoyas bloom. Some say when they reach at least 30 centimeters of length, which is again untrue. Hoyas can bloom if it's just one node to leaf cutting. It really depends on the Hoya. It doesn't have anything to do with the length of the cutting. Maybe that's something to discuss in the future video. I don't really know what triggers all of them. I think I know for some of them, but definitely not for all. Oh, this is one of my favorites. It is so untrue. Spider mites hate humidity. Do they? Do they really? What is high humidity? 50? 60? 100? Tell me, cause my humidity was from 60 to 90. All of those. I had spider mites in all of those. I used to use a humidifier, now I don't. I also had spider mites then. Basically, they were not bothered by that. What I did notice to be true is if you let the plant dry out, especially calatheas, if they dry out, if they get stressed, they will invite spider mites. They will just, I don't know, put out a call that will somehow attract all the possible spider mites. But what helps with calatheas and with other plants is to keep them evenly moist. If they aren't stressed, they're not going to attract spider mites most likely. And also what I find that helps is to keep the leaves clean, dust-free. So, taking them into a shower every 2, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. I honestly don't. That's why I sometimes get spider mites. I don't have time to take all of my plants into the shower because some plants are simply very prone to spider mites. Alocasias, calatheas, some types of orchids, especially those with thin leaves. What I do is I make sure to shower those as often as I can. I make sure that they don't dry out, that they stay evenly moist. And I also make sure to group them together. So all of the calatheas will be in one spot. They will not mix in with other plants because I don't want the spider mites to transfer. And I find that this really helps. Sure, if one calathea gets it, all of them will get it. That's fine. I don't care that much. It makes me sound like a monster, but it is what it is. Anyways, humidity, spider mites, completely untrue. And this is not just me. I talked to many people about this. They have humidifiers, they have high humidity, they still get spider mites. So no, it's just untrue. The next myth, plants love tiny pots. And this kinda expands. It's not just that plants love tiny pots. I saw orchids or Hoyas bloom better in tiny pots, or they won't bloom unless they are in a tiny pot. I read that Hoyas won't grow unless they are in a tiny pot. All sorts of things that are passed off as facts but are in fact opinions. I asked you recently on Instagram, do you think that my Hoya retusa is in a tiny pot? Overwhelming number of you said no, it is not in a tiny pot, and I do agree with you. And the reason I did this is because I keep seeing this all the time. When someone has an issue with a plant, the diagnosis is it's in a pot that is too big. That is really not the problem. It's something else that is the issue. Now, I think plants love tiny pots comes from the overwatering. You know, when you have a smaller plant in a slightly bigger pot with more potting mix, the potting mix will hold on to the moisture longer. Now, I don't say go crazy with the size of the pot. I'm just saying be reasonable about it. There's no need to keep an extremely large plant in a very small pot for it, and you know, to keep this plant so root bound that all the potting mix is no longer there. I will show you my Hoya retusa because it is in bloom for the second time this year. So you can see this really isn't a tiny pot, and now it got caught on the microphone. You can see it has lovely blooms. I think I will definitely have to do a bit of B-roll for this one. This pot didn't prevent this Hoya to grow or to bloom, and it is doing really well. I water it about once a week, maybe less, not because I should, but because it's up there hanging. And I told you before, I kind of have an issue with hanging plants. They're a bit difficult for me. They're not actually difficult, I'm lazy, but that's a different issue. In my opinion, it isn't also overpotted. I think this is just the right pot for this size of the plant. Another thing with keeping your plant in a tiny pot and never repotting it is the potting mix. Organic potting mix breaks down over time. As the mix breaks down, the pH will change. When the pH changes, that affects plant's ability to take in nutrients that you give it through fertilizer. So you do need to change the mix every now and then. I saw many times extreme examples of underpotting your plant. My 3 monsteras that I got were in super tiny pots. The pots were this size, and they were very big plants. When I took them out, there was nothing there but the roots. And I gave them quite a bit bigger pot, and actually they did grow really well in the past year, and the roots filled out that pot. They had room to grow finally. I don't really think that keeping it in super tiny pot is a good idea, and it actually creates this fear of repotting a plant, especially when you get it. And we know that oftentimes plants will come in a very bad mix, and I see this all the time. I think it's because of don't repot your plant, keep it in a tiny pot. All of these misconceptions are creating fear of repotting a plant, and I don't think that's something that we should keep. I think that's something that needs to go. Let's just move on to the next myth, because someone is getting lost here with his thoughts. Boiling water improves quality. It really does not. Nothing happens really. I checked. I measured the ppm before boiling the water and after boiling the water. And here I refer to the tap water. My tap water has a very high ppm, which is dissolved particles in water. So anything that is in tap water. I checked before. It was 380, I think, or 390. And after boiling, it only reduced by 5 numbers. So I think it was 375 or something like that. And I did let it sit out for 24 hours, and it changed maybe 1 or 2 more numbers down. So not a very significant change there. The reason we let the tap water sit out for 24 hours, for several days, for how long you want, is to let the chlorine evaporate. And if chlorine is used as a disinfectant with the water, then okay, that might happen. If it's chloramine, not gonna happen really, sorry to tell you that. And it doesn't really affect the hardness of water. So you can really check that. You can take your regular glass, put tap water in it, let it sit for several days, and you will see calcium deposits on that glass. That will be very difficult to clean, so don't blame me for that. Of course, that will happen only if you have very hard water. In different towns, in different cities, the hardness of water will be different, so I do recommend to get a ppm or TDS meter to check if that is something that is really important to you. Also, some people leave the water out so it can get to the room temperature, but I find if you really want to use tap water, you can just make it warm, coming out from the tap, slightly warm, so you don't need to let it sit out. Do I think that using tap water is a good idea? Well, it depends. Some plants might not mind, some plants will. Orchids will mind, depending again on your tap water. Some Hoyas might mind. They say that calatheas mind. I never watered my calatheas with anything that isn't filtered water or distilled water or rainwater, so they always had special treatment. And they are divas anyways, so I don't know, maybe it would be worse with tap, maybe it would be better, maybe they will toughen up with tap water, I don't know. I know that some people do use tap water, like Kathy. Her channel is Kathy's Projects. She uses tap water for her calatheas and they're fine. I think it is fine. If you want to use tap water, sure, you can do it. If you notice that it's affecting your plant, then maybe you should switch to something else, especially if it's some very sensitive, rare plant, whatever you like to grow. But all in all, leaving the tap water just sit out or boiling it will not help. So I kind of want to say don't waste your time with that. Better collect rainwater. It will take the same amount of energy or maybe even less if you have the ability to do so. The next myth. Just add ice. Don't just add ice. Honestly, when was the last time that you were thirsty and you took a glass and put ice in it and tried to drink ice? I bet it was never. Why would anyone think that putting ice cubes on pots will be good for the plant and that is an efficient way to water it? It doesn't make sense. At all. None. And just add ice is a thing that kinda is going on in the orchid community. Some novice orchid growers buy orchids with the tag just add ice. On that tag there are instructions to put 1 or 2 ice cubes near the root, and that's how you should water your orchids. You put an ice cube, the ice will melt, and that is the sufficient amount of water they need. This is actually one of the just add ice orchids. It's underpotted, and also the roots went through this, so don't judge me. I should have repotted this a long time ago. So don't because now this will be extremely difficult to get out. I will have to damage the tip of the root because I won't be able to fish it out of here. And anyways, that doesn't matter. This was one of the just add ice orchids. I never added ice to it. It rebloomed. I bought this, I think, last year. Apparently, you can grow them without adding the ice. Again, it is all about just getting the mix right and just getting the watering right. Just adding ice will not solve anything. It will most likely kill your plant. Some people say that it works. I read some comments that say that it works. I'm really concerned in the long run what will be the effect on the orchids. Just Add Ice, the company, they claim this has been tested. There was a research or something, I'm not sure. I think that is the claim. I don't remember, maybe that's not true, so we'll just say allegedly that is the claim. If that's what they're advertising, I would like to read that research. So I decided to go to Just Add Ice website to check if there is a research, and it turns out there is. If we go under care and under watering, you will see that watering with ice couldn't be easier. All you need is 3 ice cubes, so I was wrong. It is not 1, 2, it is 3 ice cubes. They do say you can choose to use water, but no more than 1/4 of a cup. Why ice? It's easy to remember, ensures your orchid gets just the right amount, doesn't harm the flower longevity, and ensures the root system absorbs water evenly. Are you sure ice won't harm my orchids? Yes, they are. There is a research by the Ohio State University, University of Georgia. So let's check it out. Okay, this is the research. Ice cube irrigation of potted Phalaenopsis orchids does not decrease display life. There is a very long abstract, which traditionally is the shortest part of a research. It's displayed on one page. I don't know if there is a longer research than this, or this is all of it, but no matter, we will look into the abstract. So abstract tells us very important thing, that historically orchids have been associated with the wealthy and orchid enthusiasts, and which is very relevant for ice cube irrigation. Proper irrigation is a challenge. As we know, it is always a challenge. The Ohio State University and University of Georgia, they had 2 locations, 24 orchids at each locations with 3 ice cubes. So that's how we watered. And with water also, equivalent volume of room temperature water every week. Plants were maintained in an interior elevation for 4 to 6 months, which is very brief if you ask me. To know if something works, we need more than 4 to 6 months. And you know in the plant community that if you want to decide if something works for your plant, you may need longer time than this. The temperature of the bark ice irrigation reached a low of 11 degrees. So the conclusion is also here, ice irrigation did not cause early flower loss. And of course, the consumer success with their potted plants is an important aspect of the industry. So we have it all in the abstract. In the introduction, we have again a very relevant thing, that Phalaenopsis are very good at selling themselves, do well as a house plant, and then the ice cube irrigation has been promoted to give straightforward instructions for irrigating orchids. Objective is to evaluate the health and display life of the Phalaenopsis orchids at 2 locations. Again, things are repeating basically. So let's check the first results. Flower longevity under different irrigation treatments. We see that with ice and water, flower longevity is the same. It's interesting to me that in both locations they're getting the same results. So the conclusion here, flower longevity was not affected by irrigation treatment. Display life under different irrigation treatments. With water, you get a shorter display life, it seems, and quite a similar result here in Georgia. This is the visual comparison of after 4 months, how the orchids look like with ice and with water. Let's go to some more graphs. Media temperature. So you can see the temperature goes as low as 13. I thought we said 11, but in the graph there is no 11. Anyways, interesting to see that. So the average media after water irrigation in bark was 20 to 21.3. With ice cubes, it was 13.6. And media temperature returned to pre-treatment temperatures 5 hours after ice cube application. What I'm interested to know is long-term effects of this. So this is happening every week, each time the orchid receives water. So I'm not interested in 4 to 6 months. I'm interested in 2, 3, 5 years, what the orchids will look like. Visual comparison of the roots. This is interesting. Let's check how those ice roots. So those ice roots look dead. There is a bit of green here, a bit of green there, a bit of green here. Water roots, again, not looking great. So I don't think we are working with great specimens here. So this is common for orchid roots. When you buy them, they will not be the best because the media is usually not the best as well. So they removed the leaves to visually inspect the roots, which I'm not sure why we're doing, because we can visually inspect them without that. They say they were visually similar between treatments. And then they also measured at the end the dry weights of the leaves. I don't know why. It's not explained. I honestly cannot understand why. Anyways, in the discussion, we see that consumer success with orchids will determine if they will get it again. Of course it will. The method with ice cubes has been suggested. So this is basically the same. The flower longevity it was not different. The media temperatures were not reduced low enough or long enough. Yes, but you were reducing them frequently, so I really am interested over long periods of time what this would do to the orchid. In the conclusion, it says Phalaenopsis orchids grown in bark potting media showed no damage from the ice cube irrigation treatment. Ice cube irrigation is a viable method for homeowners. I still wouldn't do it. This research did not convince me. So I'm definitely not going to try to use ice on my orchids. You're free to use ice if you want to, if you find this research enough. If you want to check out this research, you can go to Just Add Ice website, and then again, care, watering, and then you will find infrequently asked questions why you should use ice. Orchids do not encounter ice in their natural environment. Just adding ice is not something they would like. Honestly, I just don't know where to begin. I mean, imagine being thirsty and I just gave you an ice cube and like, oh, melt it in your mouth, you'll be fine. Just water it regularly, don't overwater it, make sure it's in a good mix, that it's in a very airy mix, and it will be fine. There is no need to just add ice. Also, the water will be extremely cold. Even when it melts, it will be extremely cold. And that's not something that they will naturally encounter, the orchids. In fact, for any plant, it is the best idea to water them with the water that has the same temperature as the environment that they are in. Don't water a plant that is sitting in your room with water that is 5 or 10 degrees of Celsius. You know, that's too cold. Also, don't boil your plant. Don't water with hot water. Just room temperature water. Room temperature. Another plant myth. Stressing your plant will make it flower. Stressing your plant will make your plant stressed. Will it flower? Maybe. Are there better ways to flower your plant? Yes. Take good care of your plant. Stressing the plant isn't what really makes it bloom. It depends on the plant, but usually it is, as I said, the age, changing of the seasons, or changing the length of day and night. That's what will make the plants bloom. They say this for orchids. Stressing the orchid will make it bloom. And the reason why I think this is problematic is because people go to extreme lengths to stress their orchids. For Phalaenopsis orchids, when there is the change of season, they will start to produce flower spikes. That's usually 5-6 degrees of Celsius, or maybe slightly more. For example, my temperature during the summer was around 28-30 degrees, and then it dropped to maybe 19 during the nights, now in wintertime, and 23 during the day. And all of my Phalaenopsis were able to produce flower spikes, except for those that were bought maybe in August, July, or September that were recently cut. Those didn't spike, but the rest of them that actually had a good growing season, that had rest from blooming, they all produced flower spikes. There is no need to really stress your plant, and by stress your plant, they stop watering it completely. By stressing the plant, they put it in as orchids, they put it in very cold spot. Recently, I had a phone call with a lady ask me, what can she do to make her Phalaenopsis bloom? And she said she already tried to stress it. She put it in a cold pantry with no light, because somewhere she read that is how you get an orchid to bloom. The orchid received, for 2 or 3 weeks, it received no light, and it was, I think, in maybe 10 degrees of Celsius. It certainly was stress. Of course, the orchid didn't produce a flower spike because overall it was a healthy orchid. It still is. And then I asked her when was the last time her orchid bloomed, and she said December. She cut the spikes in December of 2020, the year that shall be forgotten. It's January now. This plant was recently in bloom, and of course that it will not push out another flower spike so soon. They will need several months until they produce a flower spike. Sometimes, because these are complex hybrids, an odd thing will happen that you will cut the flower spikes and it will push out another one. It happened to me with my big white Phalaenopsis that last year I think I cut the flower spikes in December, and then it pushed out another one in January or February. Sometimes these things can happen, but really, give them some rest, make sure that your plant is healthy, and it will bloom. It really depends what is it that makes the plant bloom. If it is drier season, then yes, reducing the watering will help. But if it's a plant that never really experiences dry season, there is no point in making it go through a dry season. For example, if a plant is triggered to bloom by the change in the day length, why would you withdraw water? There is no correlation there. Another plant myth. Mayonnaise cleans the leaves. Does it really? It will make the leaf shiny. Will it clean the leaf? Not really. Is it worth to have a shiny leaf and to spread mayo on it? I don't think so. And generally, any type of oil on leaf is not a good idea, at least not pure oil. Mayo, I think, is 70% oil or 70% fat or something like that. So it's a very high fat thing to put on your leaf. We sometimes do spray the leaves with oils, but that is like 1.8 to 2% solution. So there is a lot of water there or something else. There is just a very small amount of oil there. I prefer to use paraffin oil because it is a mineral oil and it evaporates quickly. I did use vegetable oil and a higher solution of vegetable oil because I read from a very experienced grower that this is a very good homemade insecticide, and it killed some of my peperomias and other plants that were not so happy to have oil on their leaves. And the oil didn't evaporate for days, and after a week and a half, I think I was very concerned. So I tried to wash it away, and imagine washing 300 plants that were covered with oil. And I used actually water with dishwashing soap, but it wouldn't come off. It was still very greasy to the touch. So very high solution of oil or fat or whatever that is oily fatty isn't a good idea, especially because, plants use leaves to transpire. There are stomatas on the underside of the leaf, and if you put something that is very fatty on the leaf, it will clog them up. They won't be able to do what they are supposed to do. I always like to think about plants in nature. Have you ever seen anyone in nature rubbing oil, mayo, whatever thing on the leaves? Not really. Another concern is, if you have some spider mites or whatever insect that will penetrate the leaf, some sucking insect, oil can get in through those damages and suffocate the leaf. So if you want clean leaves, I think the best idea is to just take it in the shower, give it a quick shower, or take it outside if it's summer and if it's possible for you, if there is summer rain or something like that. And I don't mean summer rain oaks, I actually mean summer rain. But maybe if there is some rain oaks in your yard, she can give them a quick shower too. Certainly would help me so I don't have to do it. All in all, I do believe that oils are best used just as insecticide and only in very small amounts. So 1.8, 2%. I wouldn't go higher than 2%. I learned my lesson there, and I will definitely not be using mayo on my leaves. Let's move on to the next plant myth. Homemade fertilizers are the best. I tend to disagree. A lot of people think that if it's synthetic fertilizer, it is evil. It is not evil. I use synthetic fertilizer. I use Rain Mix. I didn't have any issues with it. It's a very good fertilizer. It has all the nutrients that a plant would need. The problem with fertilizer is that you want to make it home. You don't know how much of the nutrient is there. So you may be giving too much of one nutrient and you may be depriving your plant of another nutrient. Putting bananas in water, banana peel, putting eggshells, letting them sit. I really don't see why that's a good idea. Some people like to use rice water after cooking the rice, after cooking the spinach. I heard of that. I heard of people using the tea water, that they will add tea bags. I heard that people like to put baking powder, baking soda. Sometimes I wonder if they're making bread. Some of these things may be useful. I am very skeptic what is the extent of usability. Some people like to use nails to provide iron to the plant. They will put a rusted nail in the pot and then water. Supposedly that provides iron. If I think there is an iron deficiency, I will buy iron. There is iron as a mineral that you can spray on the leaves. That helps. But I think just getting a really well balanced fertilizer with all the nutrients, with all the micronutrients is the best idea. Then they will not face any nutrient deficiency, of course, if the pH is good and if they're able to take in those nutrients. And why would you want to have banana peels in your water with tea bags, with all sorts of stuff just hanging in there? I also heard that some people make the fertilizer by, or was it by boiling fish heads or fish tails or something related to fish? Anyways, I just prefer to use synthetic fertilizer. I don't even love all the biofertilizers because some of them have extremely bad smell and I'm not able to go there. I did before with one, it's amino acids. The first batch that I bought was okay, great. The smell was kinda nasty, but okay. The second batch, wow. It smelled like I was keeping pigs inside of my house. That's how it smelled like. And trust me, I'm from a small town. I know how pigs smell like. It smelled like I had pigs inside. And I opened all the windows and it wouldn't, it stayed for several days. It smelled like I had pigs inside. And I watered only once with this. Only once. It was awful. And I should have known not to use it because when I opened it, I almost vomited. I know it's disgusting. I'm very sorry about that. But I'm just not gonna go there again. Nope. Thank you very much. I will use what I use. You can use whatever you want to use. I'm not saying that biofertilizers are a bad idea. I use organic. Organic is excellent. It is great. Some of the seaweed fertilizers, again, don't smell so nice. Organic has a beautiful smell. It smells, if it's good, it can go bad. But if it's good, it smells like the ocean and it's supposed to be green, but it is biofertilizer, so it can go bad. Anyways, I'm not saying biofertilizers are bad, but I would think about making my own. Do you want to go there? What are you putting there? Why are you putting the thing you're putting? What does it do? All of those questions need to be answered because when we use fertilizer, we want to provide certain nutrients to our plant. So to me, if you just tell me, well, I'm using it because it's natural, isn't a good answer. What is it that you're producing? Will an orchid get banana water in nature or tea water? No. So why are you using it? Just because it's natural is not a good response to me. So if you know the response and if you can give me a thorough explanation, leave it in the comments below. What exactly is the plant getting if you water it with banana water, with spinach water, with whatever water, and to what extent? And is it something that a plant can use? Is it something that can be mobilized by the plant? See, all of those questions need to be answered. And the last one, and this is the most common one, you will not be surprised. It is very popular. Plants that love low light. No plant loves it. Not even calatheas. They don't love low light. They can survive in low lights in severe areas. They don't love it. Outside, there is so much more light than indoors. And low light for people is really no light. And I can tell you from my personal example, my sister is one of those. It doesn't need a lot of light, people. She put her Zamioculca zemifolia in a room where there is a southwest facing window and the shutters are closed almost the entire day. And it's actually away from the window. So it's the worst possible situation. And she has like 3 5-watt bulbs in the ceiling. And she's like, that's enough. That's not light. Literally, there's no light. To circle back to the phone call, I had a phone call with a lady that leaves her shutters open during the night because her orchids are in the window and there is a street light in front of her window, so they're receiving that light. That's not gonna do anything. These plants behind me, I would say this is extreme low light. And this is like 2 meters from the northwest facing window. There is some residual light coming from the shelf because there are LED lights. They're turned off now, but there are LED lights. I wouldn't say this is a good spot. These are here in banishment and punishment. This one had thrips. This one was from my sister, and I think it had mealybugs. And this one had spider mites. We sprayed that, and it's kind of too close to those. So they're like, this is plant banishment on the piano that I cannot use because I banished plants on it. So these may not stay here forever. If I decide that they should stay here forever, I might install some light, something to give them some additional light, but this is basically for me no light. I work with 2 northwest facing windows, and I think 1 meter away from the window is, again, it's a bit too much, especially when you put plants in the window, and especially if you have a lot of plants, the light will reduce drastically. That's why I use so many LED lights, because I want to provide additional light for them. Even if I go to the corner of this room, there is still enough light for me to read a book. Sometimes people say, if there is enough light for you to read a book without any additional light, then that is good. That is like low light. I would never put anything in the corner of the room, even though I can read a book comfortably without any additional light. Low light loving plant, in my opinion, doesn't really exist. They don't love low light. They tolerate low light, or they have adapted to low light in nature, but they don't love it. They adapted to it. Thank you for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it gave us some space for a healthy debate. Again, just my opinions. No one needs to get angry. Let's try to all be calm about it. I will definitely try to be calm about these myths that are passed off as facts and whatever. Words are disappearing. Words have meanings, and saying something is a fact when it's not. I know there are many more plant myths out there. Let me know down in the comments below, do you believe in some of these? Why do you believe in them? And if you can elaborate a bit on them, and let me know down in the comments below, are there some other plant myths that you heard and that kind of pissed you off? And I would just like to say, let's all try to be very careful about things that we write, about things that we suggest to people. Think about how someone might misinterpret that and how it may kill someone's plants. Just be very careful with the plant advice. It doesn't mean not to give out plant advice, but I really like to start by saying, you know, in my opinion, or in my case, or for me this worked. Many different people have different environments, different homes, different lifestyles, and your advice may not work for someone else. And let's just try to be nice to each other in the plant groups. That's really all. I mean, I can go on forever, talking forever. Someone just needs to stop me. Someone needs to come and tape up my mouth and just drag me off the camera. That is the end of the video. I will see you soon. I hope you're having a great weekend. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed to the channel, well, click that subscribe button, and I don't mind if you even turn on the notifications. I also now have a Patreon page. The link to that is in the description below. And yeah, that's all for today. Bye! I would like to take some time to thank my patrons. A big shout out to my $5 patrons: Betsy Begonia, Bonnie Harris, Kathy L, Kelsey Jager, Melissa Walker, Nicole Ferranti, Vicky Dingler, Therese Gottman, Zlokop Niponi, and my one anonymous patron. Also, big thank you to my $3 patrons: Angelina Farnan, Becca Panyard, Liz Martinez, Nahom, Ivana, Nikki, and Winglove. And a thank you to my $1 patron, Freehit Ian Ask. Thank you all so much for your support. I hope that you're enjoying the videos. I hope that you're learning something new, and if not, well, at least maybe you're having a laugh here and there. That's something. See you in another video. Bye!